Thanks, Jeff. My name is Marty Gorenzer. I'm the Program Manager for the National Good Food Network at the Wallace Center. I wanted to tell you just a little bit about the Wallace Center and the National Good Food Network before Rich gets started. The Wallace Center is based in Arlington, Virginia, and is a national domestic organization based on building regional food systems. Our focus is on moving food, helping the supply chain effort to build grower capacity so that more producers benefit and more communities have greater access to healthy food. So again, we focus on building grower capacity and helping to move that food on into institutions and communities around the nation. The National Good Food Network that is housed at the Wallace Center as the national coordinating organization is a network that the interest in this network arose from many leaders, food systems leaders around the country that saw the need to assist their regional effort in having us networked nationally, having a national coordinating entity like Wallace assist the regions through a number of different ways that this national network is now operating. So that was really the idea behind it. Was not really at Wallace. It was with the regional leaders of whom we assist. The National Good Food Network is a networking communications information hub, in that the way we talk about the Good Food Network is we connect people to people, people to other people who know about regional food systems, people to knowledge, replicable models like what you'll hear about today, and connect people to ideas and opportunities for regional and national sources of funding. We also, we call ourselves a learning and doing network, in that we spend time learning from others what's going on around the country, and we do on the ground what we call boots on the ground work as well. So regional activity, some of the work that Rich is doing in his area, he'll talk about today as well. And again, the objectives of the network are around connection, knowledge, and community. Gathering and assembling and talking about the work that we've done in regions around the country to move more good food into communities so that children and families so that healthy food reaches those children and families where they live. And that's in schools, universities, hospitals, and in their own community, especially where they currently don't have the access to that healthy food. This map gives you an overview of what the network looks like currently. We have 10 regional teams that we assist and work with us doing regional work around the country, and these regional teams are also our advisors. They're doing work on the ground, and they also are our advisors to this network, so that we are learning firsthand from the work that goes on around the country, and we can share that with you all through communications mechanisms, much like this webinar today. Also e-newsletters. We're on Twitter. You're probably familiar with ngfn.org if you're on this webinar. And there are regional convenings, regional and national convenings, of which we're all a part. The next one coming up in May 17th and 18th and 19th in Detroit, Michigan, the National Farm to Cafeteria Conference. If you look at the map on your right, as you look, the national coordination work that is done at Wallace and with consultants and other folks that we work with around the country helps to assist the regions in communication of some of the communications mechanisms we talked about, knowledge sharing, and we're moving more into the area of more interregional discussions. The advisory, here's a list of the advisory council. Again, all of this information is on the website, so you don't have to write this down. But this gives you an idea of the folks who are on our advisory council. They're RLTs and or advisors around the country. And the next slide will give you an idea of how the regions are set up in geographies across the country. These folks are working in supply chain, value chain initiatives, farm to school initiatives, what we call food access initiatives, where we're working with communities, getting grocery stores where there are none, And overall mission is to move more healthy food on into the areas where people live. Here's a map of the country, and it shows our contact points through the NGFN, the places that we are working and the places that we are working with regional leads to further develop our work. And this last slide just gives you an idea of the goals. The overall goals of the network continue to be what we call supply meets demand, and that we're engaging buyers, institutional buyers in particular, but also retail buyers, to work with them more closely in helping our folks scale up and helping the effort to move more good food into those institutions and into our communities. And then again, as I spoke about before, we also serve as an information hub. Would like at some point folks to consider the NGFN the go-to place for regional food system stories, not that are necessarily created at Wallace, but that our regional leads like Rich Pirog will share with us today have created through their entities and their regions and are sharing with the Good Food Network for the benefit of you all that are on this call today. And the third goal is around policy change, looking at issues and solutions and helping to inform that effort so that we can move forward our work in the most robust way. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about Rich Pirog, our presenter today. Rich is an NGFN advisor and regional lead and has certainly been a mentor to me and to the Wallace Center in many ways, including the Good Food Network, over the past years. He joined the Leopold Center for Sustainable Ag at Iowa State University in 1990 and was a program leader for the center's Marketing and Food System Initiative. He became the associate director in 2007. Rich directs the Value Chain Partnerships Project. It's a multi-organizational effort that provides technical assistance to farmer-led businesses. So again, helping to build grower capacity and connect those folks to new markets. Through Value Chain Partnerships, Rich leads the Regional Food Systems Working Group and focuses on making the case for investment in local and regional food systems businesses and networks, of which we're all working very hard, and Rich has certainly been a leader in this work. Rich's work and collaborations on food miles, food value chains, local and place-based food systems and eco-labels has been publicized in magazines and media outlets in the United States and internationally. He's also cited in a lot of different college courses. In 2003, he received the Iowa Sustainable Agricultural Achievement Award, and in 2004 received the Iowa State University College Agriculture Award for Outstanding Achievement and Service. And again, he has been a mentor and invaluable to the building and the growth of this Good Food Network, and we appreciate his time today. He's one that is in demand, so we appreciate it. So Rich, it's all yours.
Well, thank you very much, Marty, for that introduction, and thanks to you, Jeff, for setting everything up for this webinar. Really, it's great to have this opportunity to visit this way, and it's really great because I didn't have to take a plane to do all this. I could just sit here in my office and visit with you all about some of the work that we're doing here in Iowa in the Upper Midwest. So as Jeff had mentioned, there's going to be two parts to my comments. The first part is going to be about creating networks and our work in value chain partnerships and our working groups. The second part is going to be about a very specific multi-state project that we finished in collaboration with our other regional lead team partners around the Upper Midwest, including IATP in Minnesota, Land Stewardship Project, the Fresh Taste Initiative, University of Wisconsin, MESA in Minnesota, Michigan State Mott Group, and Indiana Cooperative Development Services. Several consultants, at least one of them was on this webinar, and Michael Fields Institute as well. So that'll be the second part, and we'll have a chance for questions in between. Okay. Just a soundbite about the Leopold Center. The center is quite unique. We are a funder. We were created as part of the Groundwater Protection Act, We're state-funded. We're sort of quasi-governmental, sort of in between being a NGO and a state agency. We have about 1.2 million per year that we get in funds from a tax on nitrogen fertilizers and the re-registration of pesticides. We actually fund and do programming in 3 areas: ecology, marketing, and food systems, which I lead, and policy. About 1/3 of our funds go to marketing and food systems. We started that work probably, I'd say, 1995. So for the last 15 years, we've been investing in work, food system work in the state of Iowa. So that's just a very quick overview of the center. So I want to get right to the work of value chain partners. I want to start with sort of a metaphor or an analogy here. And Michael Porter, who with Harvard Business School, is famous for a number of things in the business world. And one is for his work looking at clusters, business clusters. And some of us that may be familiar with his work know about clusters, but certainly everybody on the call knows about California wine. And this slide just gives you an idea of what a cluster is. It's a group of interconnected companies and associated institutions in a field. And you know, California wine cluster is one example, but we could be looking at the Italian leather industry, the agricultural corn and soybean cluster in the upper Midwest, the orange juice cluster, and within each of them, each of these clusters that are successful, you've got within a geography all of the pieces that you need in order for that particular industry to be successful. This particular map outlines what it looks like for wine. What I'd like you all to think about in using this metaphor or this analogy in your own work and around regional food systems is how can we use this kind of, this idea, this concept, and how do we use a cluster framework where we go another step further. We don't just look at economics. We look at triple bottom line assumptions and appropriate scale and scope to increase success of regional food system value chains. So what I'm going to talk about in our work really is going to zero in particularly on 3 of these boxes: the state government agencies, the growers or vineyards, and educational research and trade organizations that would make up any cluster. You know, you could design this same map for a local regional food system for something very specific like niche pork, or it could be more generalized like local food. So let's take that idea and transplant it into a landscape around technical assistance and research and education for local and regional foods. So you have this wide array of organizations, of agencies, technical assistance providers, private sector help, sustainable ag centers, the USDA, and like this very beleaguered and tired tomato in the middle of the picture, whether you're a farmer or a community, a budding entrepreneur, a network of farmers, the ability to negotiate this network of technical and financial assistance providers and researchers can be formidable. And certainly I think this work that we've done here in Iowa really fits well with the goals and vision of the National Good Food Network. In essence, we're doing within Iowa with the work I'm going to explain to you sort of a microcosm of what the National Good Food Network is doing on a national level. So we've asked ourselves those questions. We get the feedback from farmers and community leaders and entrepreneurs that it is really difficult when you've got 22 different organizations all doing different things, and you've got to figure out what each of them are doing, and and sometimes that can be extremely time-consuming, and the transaction costs are high. So as we sort of thought about redesigning how we did our work, we looked at Van de Venter's, Paul Van de Venter and Mandel's work in a very small little book called Networks at Work. And we all belong to networks. The National Good Food Network is a network. Each person on this call is in multiple networks. But Van de Venter characterized the types of network. And he talks about 3 types. And I'd really like you to think about most of the networks that you're currently working in food systems and see where they fit in with these descriptions. He talked about cooperating networks, coordinating networks, and collaborating networks. And with the cooperating networks, these are the networks that many of us are a part of, where we just get together and we share ideas, we learn different approaches. Maybe we're getting together to work on a particular problem. There's a very low level of risk and also very little chance of systemic change. What we want to be able to do, at least in some of our networks, is be able to move beyond cooperating networks to coordinating or collaborating networks that have higher levels of risk. Anytime you take more risk, there's more of a chance of failure, but there's a greater chance for reward. And there's even a better chance for systemic change. And so, in essence, our work in Value Chain Partners is moving towards these coordinating or collaborating networks where we're putting in efforts to resolve conflicts across organizations, pursuing more long-term system creation. Where, in the long term, we may even be looking at sharing positions across organizations. We really have to rethink what we want to do with our networks if we really want to create a new future for the food system that many of us espouse. So we interchangeably use the term working group, network, and community of practice. Academically and also in the business world, communities of practice, the term is very common. The definition that's most widely shared are groups of people who share a concern or problems or a passion about a topic, and they express their knowledge and expertise by interacting on an ongoing basis. In value chain partnerships, what we've done since 2002 with support from the Leopold Center, the Kellogg Foundation, and for several years, the Wallace Center, through their market-based change initiative when Wallace was first being moved into this arena of working in the National Good Food Network. We've created a network of food and agricultural working groups, and we'll talk just briefly about these groups. The coordinators or leaders of these groups meet on a regular basis, and so in a way we have a network of networks. We learn not only by the work that we do interacting with multiple organizations within an individual group, we learn by actually working across all of these groups. We've just added food access and health to this list with funding by the Leopold Center, and we're excited to be able to expand this within Iowa and the upper Midwest to other groups as well. So let's just talk briefly about what we do. And we were very fortunate to have some very good business consulting help from the beginning, and they drilled into us, you got to know what you're doing well to be able to eventually get to the point that you can make that elevator speech when you're trying to convince other key influential people or funders about the importance of your work. So what we do are really four things. We're information hubs. We've really become in Iowa what we have been referred to as a multi-organizational extension service, so to providing that assistance across organizations. And we manage both tacit and explicit knowledge. And this is real important, this idea of tacit knowledge, because you can't put tacit knowledge in a fact sheet and give it to somebody else. You've got to talk about it to be understood. And so the community of practice framework, where you've got people that sort of understand the basics of something, but they need to be able to get together and talk about it to apply it. That's so essential. So face-to-face meetings and interaction are key to our work. We're catalysts for cooperation to build trust and capacity across organizations. If we're ever going to get out of our silos, we've got to do that. We've been able to leverage funding using the funds we have, in part because we're organized. And last, that we're scouts. With that kind of brain power we have, we feel we're at the cutting edge of new ideas within those particular either product areas like niche pork or grass-based livestock, or in a more general area like regional food systems. So why are we different? You're probably saying, I belong to networks that do that, and I hope you do, and I hope there's many more examples. We've been looking across the country, and we have found several that sort of fit a similar model to the way we're doing it here in Iowa. But in essence, the difference here is that we have a network orientation. As I'll share, we have more of a model of co-opetition than competition with each other. We're trying to grow the network field rather than an individual organization or an individual company. We want to grow the funding pie rather than just compete for resources, and we are not top-down or centralized. We're very decentralized in our approaches. This is just a list of a number of the niche port companies that our niche port group currently works with, ranging from a company that only has 3 or 4 producers with maybe 20 hogs a week to Nyman Ranch, which has thousands per week. Some of these are organic, some of these are niche only because of a few points of differentiation, and over the years we've been able to develop the kind of trust across these organizations by solving problems that they all need to have solved, whether they're around logistics, transportation, around marketing. One of the biggest things we've done is pull together a grant to really look at cost of production and efficiencies, because many of these operations really didn't know whether they were profitable, and yet we have these markets, but no one really knew they were profitable, and you can't get money from a banker unless you can show where within the operation you're making money and where you're losing money. So small meat processors working group, and also each of these groups are led by different organizations, so that's part of the beauty of this. It's sort of like a Knights of the Round Table. They've produced some really cutting-edge documents, this group, from both designing a meat plant to documents for consumers to a guidebook for processors that's being used not just in Iowa but around the country. The leader of this group, Arian Tabumari, also co-leads the National Small Meat Processing e-extension community of practice, and I think that's been featured on the NGFN website. Regional Food Systems, which I lead, is the one group that's more of an Uber or umbrella group. It's an umbrella network for all Iowans that work in regional and local food systems. We try to basically provide a space or an environment for all of those leaders, farmers, mayors, community leaders, NGOs, government, private organizations, to come together to learn from each other about what it will take to build a more resilient local and regional food system and support more robust and grounded businesses that have community support. So we do this with some research. We do it by convening, and we provide some seed funds for each of these groups. These groups are amazing. There's at least 1 or 2 of them that are listening in on this call, and I don't want them to get swelled heads, but they're my mentors and my leaders. I just find learning from them and being able to just helping to create a space for them to build their work has been really exciting. We've got a map here. This is our latest map to show where we are in the state. Some of the areas actually overlap, and there's more work going on than just these 9 groups that we're currently involved in. Many other groups are involved. We just haven't given them some basic seed funding yet. We actually hope before, probably by this time next year, that we'll be covering all of the counties, and then every entity that's working in local and regional foods in the state will come together quarterly to be able to learn from each other and be able to build new networks that they'll create at the local or regional level that'll sort of come out of this. And that's already happening with this group. Some of the leaders on this group are already on monthly calls with each other, and that's what we wanted to see happen. We wanted for them to move towards more self-government. We function by sharing information and identifying opportunities. We provide seed grants. The funds we provide, which are very small, leverage other grant resources and help, because they're part of a network, help some of our partners get larger grants, which we've had some, and bring in new foundations, which has been really exciting. We also, because all of these groups that I've mentioned, all 6 of these working groups are connected, when an issue comes in this group about niche pork or small meat processing or fruits and vegetables, we have a place where some of that research can be done with one of the other working groups, which is so exciting. The experience groups are providing feedback and as sort of a different alternative funding model. These older existing groups are really helping us decide, really rating and deciding who the new groups shall be. And our whole goal here is moving towards self-management. where at some point in the future, you know, I'll be in the background and I'll sort of just ride off into the sunset. Through, you know, our work at the center, Beth Larrabee, our program assistant, has helped build our named social network site for this group. As I mentioned, the food coordinators around the state, they're calling each other. We need these nested networks that will eventually, you know, that are connected at various nodes with some of these regional national networks like NGFN. That's what I feel is the real strength of what we're doing in this group and the other working groups. So sort of ending here, and then we'll stop for questions. This just gives you a picture of what all these networks look like, starting at the very local level in these local groups around the state, like the Northwest Iowa Regional Food System and Northwest Iowa Food and Farm Coalition. All of our working groups, you see the Kellogg Food and Fitness Initiative, Farm to School and AmeriCorps, the Leopold Center, SARE and other grant projects. All of that work sort of gets folded in here. Our regional RLTs, and then certainly last but not least at a national level, at that umbrella level, the connections that are made with webinars like this and other information through the Wallace network. So what are our outcomes? Very quickly, we have a lot of diversity in these groups, more than you'd normally have. It's not just nonprofits and researchers. We've got we're bringing in all of the stakeholders that would address a particular product issue, a social issue, or in the case of local regional foods or food access, community or social issue. We've generated a fair amount of funding. We're already having local government buy-in, which will sort of segues into the economic impact work. I'm a really firm believer in synchronization in networks, and if things aren't really synchronized, it just looks like a lot of people doing stuff and the work isn't additive. We're really working on to try to make this work more additive. So all the pieces contribute to each other, and that it really looks more impressive to our funding partners, our state legislators, and other key influentials that really need to support this work if we're really going to get it away from just grant funding. And that's part of the reason we're taking this approach. I mentioned our niche pork group. Those niche pork businesses now actually invest in the working group operation. It's not just grant funded. They also work with each other, even though they're competitors. Some of them ship pork together to the coast and save pots of money that way. Also, another outcome out of this has been the Iowa legislature passed an amendment this year, no money attached, but they've asked the Leopold Center to develop a food and farm plan with funding and policy recommendations for the state of Iowa. That would never have been possible if it wasn't for these local networks. They really helped make that possible. When we did some actual workshops in the communities of practice, folks have given us a lot of feedback. We've done a lot of evaluations. We've got a part-time person at the Leopold Center, Corey Bregendahl, that works with us on evaluation. She lives this with our work. She doesn't just come in and do surveys. And we've seen people, and this, I think this first quote is really critical. People view these as democratic, and that's, I think, for any network, that is a key to its resilience and survival, is that there has to be a level of democracy built in so that people feel that their voice is heard within the network. Here are the addresses, and again, Wallace is going to have this on their site. This is our value chains value chains partnership website, and then we have two social network sites, one's for regional foods and another hasn't been open to the public per se, but you can certainly go out there and take a look and snoop around. It was for a workshop we did last summer where we had 60 people from 17 states come in to learn about communities of practice. So at this point, I would like to stop before we go into the Upper Midwest study and take some questions. And I already have one comment here that it really isn't a question, that's a really cute picture of Rich, but I don't know how to respond to that one. So, and as I said, they did a lot of photo retouching of that picture, so that's probably the best you're ever going to see of me.
Are there any questions? Or if not, we can move on to the second section. I'll give people a minute or two just to type in their questions.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and proceed, Jeff.
Sure, and then we can do a larger Q&A period at the end.
All right.
All right.
Okay, so even though this second part is different because it's a research study, this study really reflects the nature of what we're trying to do in value chain partnerships, and that is to make, not only address challenges, but make a better case for investment for local and regional food commerce. So this particular study, which we just finished and went on our website about a month ago, was conducted by Dave Swenson, who works in the economics department at ISU. Dave has worked with us at the Leopold Center for about 4 years, and we've done, this I think is the 6th study we've done with Dave. The Leopold Center coordinated and provided the primary funding for this, but our partners in the Upper Midwest, RLT, who are listed at the bottom of this slide, all helped purchase data sets for their own states so that we could expand this work across all 6 states in the Upper Midwest. We focused just on fresh fruit and vegetable production, and we wanted to look at a picture of what the total economic value is for 2 different scenarios, which we'll talk about, and provide some economic context for that, for those scenarios of what the merits would be of investing more in local and regional food systems, particularly fruits and vegetables, in the upper excuse me, in the Upper Midwest. Excuse me, I'm losing a little bit of my voice here. Okay, so again, Dave Swenson helped conduct the research. Both myself and other members of our RLT helped design the scenarios. So we had 2 basic scenarios. One is each state would feed itself only. So this obviously is going to be more valuable for perhaps state policy. And the second one is very different. We looked at the metro areas in all 6 states, and we targeted how we could provide partial demand for those metro areas. And this probably is a bit more realistic because, as we know, producers don't stop at state boundaries, and some of our state marketing programs really don't help individual producers as much because they are marketing in 4 states. If you're at the corner of a state like Northeast Iowa, you're selling into Iowa, Minnesota, Illinois, and Wisconsin, not just Iowa. So that's all important. So just a little context here. What you're looking at in this slide just shows you the average vegetable acres per 1,000 persons. And so 4 of the states in the Upper Midwest actually surpass the average. Only Indiana, Illinois, and Iowa are lower. And in the case of fruit production, there should have been a slide there for fruit production. I may have gotten those out of step, but let me just go ahead one slide.
You want
to could you, Jeff,
a few more slides in? Yeah. Here, this is what you want.
Yeah, this is the one I wanted. Yeah, so for fruit production, obviously Michigan blows the other states out of the water with all their cherries and apples and other fruits. And us lightweight states like Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, and Minnesota are very small, making smaller contributions in those areas. Okay. Yeah, somehow, Jeff, was this the next slide? This is the next slide. Yeah, the things it seemed like it was jumping ahead. The steps we took to do that for these scenarios, is we looked at per capita consumption as a function of demand. There's a lot of details to this. You have to read the paper to go into every assumption that we made, but some of the key ones is that we sort of indexed the averages for the yields based on grain crop yields in each state, and we use sort of their index to Iowa estimates. If anybody looks at the paper and say, oh, these crop yields seem low or high, you can actually go in and adjust them, and it's a sort of a linear process that's explained in there, and to come up with some new numbers. We didn't account for climate difference. We didn't account for things like irrigation. What we assumed is, and we also didn't look at the those fruit or vegetable crops that we overproduce and market outside of the region for, and I'll mention those in a second. But we looked at 28 items, and we said that, well, we looked at it over the year, and many people, and we don't have research data. This is actually a weakness of this study. We're making some pretty bold assumptions here. We basically are saying that for these items, the percentage you're seeing here is the percent that we could provide in the summer, but because many of us eat these items mostly just in the summer, they're more than just 25%. They're maybe 50% of what we eat in a year. So these are somewhat arbitrary. We did them by looking at production and consumption data that we had that was anecdotal. But that gives you an idea of the percentages. So we didn't look at 100% for the year. We looked at either 25 or 50%. We excluded crops that were ready in great supply, cranberries, potatoes, and cherries for states like Wisconsin and Michigan, and also some of the more exotic items that we don't have price information. And here are that list of the 28 candidate crops that we looked at in the 6-state area. A few of these are basically grown in tiny quantities or not at all, like peaches I'm saying they're grown in the 6 states, but in some states they're not grown very much. Like we grow basically no peaches in Iowa. So let's talk about scenario 1 first. This is within state boundaries. It's probably more amenable to policy advocacy and, you know, your own Buy Fresh program within your own state, and it's only within state demand. The second scenario is based on metro areas. It disregards state boundaries and looks at things on a county basis. and we use sort of some algorithms to help to sort of consider both the ability to produce and the capacity of that land to produce. We also factor in the disincentives of distance. In other words, the farther away you are from a market, the less chance you're going to sell to that city. And as I mentioned, we provide county-level estimates that are summed back. So, so we looked at the fruit and vegetable production value of the 28 crops. Real important, I'm going to say this again, we are not calculating net economic impact here. We're calculating economic values. In other words, we haven't, we don't know exactly what the production is, particularly on the county level for many of these fruits and vegetables because of the missing values in the census data. If there's only one producer in a county or two, or I think you have to have at least 3. So we're only looking at not net economic impact. We're looking at production value, the jobs that are created and accumulate at the farm production level. We look at the acres required and the current value of that production were to produce corn and soybeans. So we offset, in other words, these new acres that are going to go to fruits and vegetables are coming out of corn and soybeans. So we look at the job creation and the labor income of the new fruit and vegetable acres, and we're also looking at what we're losing by taking them out of corn and soybeans. And we also looked at economic estimates. Were 50% of these items sold by farmers/retailers? In other words, sort of a scenario of an economy where these farmers are being able to sell these items to various markets. So let's go right to the numbers, and I'd ask you to train your eyes on the bottom set of numbers because that's the top set is Iowa, the bottom is the combined 6 level. So the net economic value at the farm level is about a total of 9,302 jobs. That's direct, indirect, and induced. Briefly, the direct are the jobs and the output and the value added and the labor income that comes from the actual enterprises themselves. The indirect are the suppliers, the input suppliers that the direct, in this case the farmers, are buying from. Those are the jobs created in that sector. And induced are the jobs created when the people in the direct sector and the indirect sector spend their money in the economy. So they go out and get haircuts, they buy lumber, they do other things. That creates jobs because they have money. So the net on the farm level for these 6 states with this scenario was over 9,000 jobs. Now, this isn't net. It's, because we, as you'll see from this next slide, we have to offset, at the very least, we have to offset the jobs that same acres would have created, do create in corn and soybeans. And you can see again from the bottom, looking at the combined state level, that's over 2,500 jobs. So again, you can see just taking those farm value jobs of over 9,000, you'd have to subtract these to get an idea of how many jobs you're netting. Okay, we also looked at the retail sales requirements. In other words, the fruit and vegetable establishments that are going to sell and market these produce items. So they would we'd need about 1,400 establishments. We already have some existing establishments. So remember, this is total value. This isn't how many new ones. I think we have 400 or 500 in the 6 states already. And these are the number of jobs that would be created through the selling of 50% of the fruits and vegetable production within the region. So again, these numbers aren't the kind of numbers we would get from perhaps some other industries. They're modest, but they are quite significant. Okay, let's move to this. I should also say, before I talk about the second scenario, that first scenario that I just talked about, just to show you, this really isn't a major, this is a minor, insignificant land use change. In order to create that first scenario, we basically would need the land of one Iowa county to supply that scenario 1 with all those fruits and vegetables. So the actual land use, the actual change in land use and actual acreage is very, very small. Okay, second scenario. This is demand density driven production. So we looked at, again, this is a very focused set of assumptions. We only looked at metro areas in the 6 states that were over 250,000. And if they were on the border of those 6 states like Toledo, we included them, at least part of them. This is what that map would look like with the locations, and the expected sales are shaded in different colors. So the closer you are to some of the biggest metro areas, the deeper the shading. Oop, Jeff, can you go back one? Okay, thank you. Actually, just stay there, and I'll. Okay, the direct outcomes, the actual acres required. You can see this here again. Again, it's actually a little lower than scenario 1. The potential retail value, over $2 billion. The distribution of counties by acres and total level farm level sales. Again, only a few of these counties are going to have huge sales, and those are the ones closer to the metro areas. But a number of them are going to see some moderate to modest sales, and a small percentage, about 54, are just they're far enough away from the metro areas that they would see no sales. Based on, I think we used 150 miles. In other words, if you were more than 150 miles from that metro area, your county wouldn't be included in a prorated way as part of that market and part of the sales. So what were our farm level impacts? Well, there again, this is scenario 2. Real important thing, you can't add up the job numbers or the output numbers or the value added or labor income numbers from scenario 1 and scenario 2. They're completely separate scenarios. It's like one of those things where they say, don't touch that, it's hot, and you go and touch it. Don't try to add up these numbers. They're 2 separate scenarios. Actually, in this more realistic metro area scenario, the job creation at the farm level and the amount of production is a little lower than in the first scenario. But this is probably a bit more realistic. And then we see the offsets from corn and soybean production like we did in the first scenario, because we take these acres out of corn and soybeans in order to grow more fruits and vegetables, there's jobs that are offset there. I'm going to end here with the retail summary. So these are, again, the jobs that are created outside of the farm level production. The first set, the top part of this slide, are like what we saw in scenario 1. These are the retail, farmer retail sales, direct values for that 50%. It's about 6,000 jobs. And then what we did in the bottom here, and we only, for these slides, we only showed this for the second scenario. These are the induced economic values from the employees, the 6,000 employees spending their money in the economy that would be created in these states from the farmer retail direct sales. So this goes one layer more than the first scenario as far as additional jobs. So you could, in essence, add these two numbers up, the 6,000 and the 1,500. Oh, and it's real important to say that you can't, within a scenario, as you go from farm level sales and then the retail sales, you don't add those numbers up because they actually overlap somewhat. So again, that's why we consider them separate. So this is a great snapshot, and we hope by doing this study, we hope that that some of these numbers can be used at the state level for folks to make their own arguments about the economic impact of a more robust fruit and vegetable industry in the upper Midwest. We also hope that folks can use it in their grant applications when they're writing their USDA and other grants, so they can, again, have sort of a basis or a place to start from. You know, this second part of the presentation, you know, is focused on, you know, on metrics and measurements, and by doing this work, we have some targets out there, and knowing, you know, what really might be possible. And although I don't have time here, there's a number of other tools that we're developing at the Leopold Center on produce that will help inform both our policymakers and our farmers. Look for those later this summer. We have a new version of our produce market calculator that will be able to give you ideas of market potential by distance from any city within Iowa, even if it's at a in the bordering with another state. And we're actually going to provide instructions how other states could create the same template so that this kind of tool could be used in other states. I know John actually saw me preview it in Michigan the other day. So cautions and concerns. Again, these are not net economic impact. So don't go off telling folks there's 9,000 jobs created for scenario 1 because you didn't take into account the offsets for corn and soybeans. You gotta look at the total here. We also, and it's not in my slide here, but we really don't know if a, quote, local and regional produce food system distribution infrastructure, we don't know whether if it's more locally distributed versus just having those same fruits and vegetables distributed by existing distributors. We have no idea what the differences in job creation and labor income between those two, and we didn't model that. The gravity assumptions of 150-mile radius for metro area, maybe that's too restrictive. We could, you know, look at that different. Again, we don't want to add the scenarios together as far as the numbers go. And our guesses about consumption, that when we use the assumption that they were either 25 or 50% of annual consumption, those are educated guesses. They're not based on within-state research of what we actually consume on a monthly basis. So if we had that kind of data, we would try to use it in this model to fine-tune these results. And again, because we don't know all of the production on the county basis of what actually we currently have in the state, this isn't net economic impact. It's just sort of what's possible in these two scenarios. The other thing it's important to note here, and that's the last part of this slide, is that you know, other states like California and Oregon, and certainly in the Midwest, Michigan, they have competitive advantages. And And there's reasons why Iowa and Illinois don't grow as many fruits and vegetables. And we can't just assume them away and think that a study like this will just open the door and all of a sudden we'll have thousands of farmers growing fruits and vegetables. It's all part of that cluster concept that I shared at the beginning. We need the research, we need the trade organizations, we need the technical and financial assistance. We need all of the pieces to make a cluster competitive for a really robust fruit and vegetable industry in the upper Midwest. The first part of my presentation about networks and this part about economic impact serve as pieces of how we can help develop that in the upper Midwest. And I'm hopeful folks that are listening in from around the country could think of these as concepts and metaphors and apply them in their own regions of the country. So for this second study, for the economic study, you can either contact Dave for the more technical questions. It's available on our website, and I think there's a link on the NGFN network site. Glad to talk to you more about it. This is not easy work. It takes a lot of skill, and the tool that's used, Implan, which is an input-output model, is not something that anybody can just blindly use. It takes someone with years of training to use it in a way and put in the kind of adjustments that are necessary to work in these somewhat unknown areas like local and regional food. So, Jeff, with that, I have finished my formal comments and be happy to entertain questions.
Sure. There are a few questions to start out about a little bit further about the assumptions. Jim asks, are the fruit and vegetable demand assumptions based on current demand?
They're based on national food availability data sets of sort of national proxies for national consumption. So if we had data on a state-by-state basis knowing what we actually consume for each of those, we would try to substitute that in, but we're using the national data sets.
Okay. Melanie asks about, she's wondering if there's enough legal labor available, and does the study assume that? Her experience is that there are farmers who are unwilling to increase the size of their farm because the labor just doesn't exist.
Certainly in Iowa, that's a huge issue of having adequate labor. I think there's probably other folks on the call, and my colleagues in the upper Midwest could probably speak about their own labor issues. It's critical. It's important to say that these job numbers, all these jobs aren't created equal. The farm production jobs are considered as like any farm job. They're seasonal. Is there some magic per hourly rate that we're using? No, but I would say that these aren't minimum wage positions that are being created here. I don't have I can't give you an exact figure because it really varies for each part of the model, but these are jobs that would probably annualize out at least on the farm production level and in the other retail direct level where that are livable wages. They're not $6 or $7 an hour, more like $15, $20 an hour.
Joan asks about the definition of farmer retail sales direct. She asks, why does it take more labor to sell regional product rather than current product, and doesn't this increase sales cost increase the price of the product?
Let's take that in two parts.
Sure.
Okay, so ask the first part again.
She asks why it takes more labor to sell regional product than the current system, the sales labor.
Are we comparing scenario 1 versus 2?
I don't know.
Okay. When we look at when we looked at the let me just try to explain what we did with the farmer retail sector.
Sure.
So this is based on some previous work that we did, where we actually we actually create a part of the in-plan model that is like a farmer retail outlet, and we have some assumptions around that, and that becomes sort of like this farmer store where the products are actually sold out to whoever the buyers would be. There needs to be staff to be able to market those products. It's not assumed the farmers would be selling them themselves. That's why additional jobs were created. And I guess I would ask, given the nuance of this question, I would ask, and I know Joan, I would ask her to send me an email, and we can answer the more specifics of it offline.
Great. Let's see. Anne was asking about the farmers markets, which is, I guess, also on the direct sales. As one retail scenario, what are the other retail scenarios? And were some more attractive for job creation and local economic development than others?
We didn't model specific scenarios like farmers markets or CSAs. We made some general assumptions about these products being sold in these sort of farmer stores, so that we could actually put them in the model. They became a business that was making sales. So no, we didn't look at actual data from CSAs or farm stands. We sort of used prices, and it's also explained in the paper where we got our pricing information from. We used USDA AMS data. We used national data. We didn't use any local data. So that's how I would explain it. It's very it's very generic. Trying to build the kind of model where we'd actually use real CSA and farmers market data would be great. We'd be still working on doing it for a few counties if we were doing this. This is using, as much as possible, we're using state level and national data and sort of generalizing it down to come up with these economic values.
Okay. Cheryl asks how the economic studies results account for federal policy on subsidizing the commodity crops.
Well, there's no subsidies in these. They're not considered in here, and we, as far as in the job creation for the corn and soybean offsets, I'd have to double check on whether those transfer payments are included in as part of there's certainly, in Iowa, based on work by Department of Economics, about a little less than half of net farm income does come from government payments in our state, since we're very much just corn and soybeans. But I'd have to look back at the specifics of the paper to see if that's factored in. I think it is, but I'd have to check to be sure. But again, the fruit and vegetables scenarios we didn't factor in any subsidies. There was a question earlier, Jeff, about the networks. Should I try to answer that?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. I asked a question. Yeah, why don't we go over to
I didn't hear your question, so.
Yeah, no, I was muted. All right, we can go ahead. There's just a couple questions for clarification on subtracting the jobs that are replaced. One about the retail and losing the old jobs. How did you account for that?
Well, what we did, the main offset that we showed in the paper was looking at the farm level production, and then we offset by, so you could see how many jobs would exist in those acres if they were in corn and soybeans. So yes, you could take remember, these are economic values, they're not net, because we don't know how much exactly we're producing in each state. But you could take, for that scenario, the farm level production values, and then you could subtract from it those jobs for the corn and soybean offsets for both scenarios. And that would give you an idea at the farm level of the sort of the number, just the net value of the jobs. And again, because we don't know how many are currently producing, we don't know if that's totally net impact. But you can subtract the corn and soybean offset from the first number. That's what they were intended. We wanted to show them in part, and there's actually a table in the paper where we actually look at ratios. In other words, what's the difference between a fruit and vegetable acre as far as job creation and labor income versus corn and soybean acres? And interestingly enough, it varies from state to state. But those ratios are anywhere from 3.5 to 4 to I think a little over 4 to 1. In other words, the fruit and vegetables will have a 3 to 4-fold job creation value relative to corn and soybeans. We use corn and soybeans because within the upper Midwest, certainly within 4 of the 6 states, but I think all of the states grow corn and soybeans. That's sort of the common denominator. If you're going to transition out of a commodity crop, chances are you'd be transitioning out of corn and soybeans.
There's a question about if direct farm-to-school programs and farm-to-institution programs were accounted for.
No. We didn't track any. We don't know enough about all of our local food systems work. That's part of our problem. And in order to influence all of this policy work, we need much more robust data sets of the kind of sales that we're getting to really know what impact that current local and regional foods is making on a state, on a region. So we have some ideas. I know in Iowa, a number of our local groups and leaders, they collect some data, but they're snapshots, and we don't know if they're comprehensive. So this is part of what we need to do, and we need federal government help to help us incentivize the collection of that so we could really show what a state is contributing to the economy. Until we have that, I think one of the best things we can do is create scenarios. And we've done that here in Iowa. Michigan has done that, and a few other states, I think Ohio and others, have done that. But until we have that data, it's really tough to do.
Question about the produce market calculator you mentioned. Where can it be found, and is it available for use by other states?
The old version is still on our website under Cool Tools on the marketing page. The new version will be out before the end of the summer, and it's still only Iowa-based. But we will, as part of our deliverable, we plan to include a how-to guide so that other states, with a little bit of their own resources, a grad student could basically just use the formula we used and create their own version. It's really a very elaborate Excel spreadsheet, and we'll have a user interface on top of it. So the user will never actually go into Excel. They'll be using this interface. But again, it'll be the end of the summer. I'm sorry to say we can't do it for the whole country. We do have an existing tool that uses another data set, actually uses food availability data. It's called the U.S. Food Market Estimator, and that's a bit more crude in what it can do, but it will give you demand values on a county basis for all counties in the country. That's also under Cool Tools on the Leopold Center marketing web page of our site.
Okay. I want to ask, there were a few questions that came in about the communities of practice, so let me switch topics back to that. Warren asks if you know of any examples of communities of practice developing without a strong initial leadership such as yours.
I think, and the leadership question is critical. Because it's more of a servant leader that you need to really, I think, make these these communities of practice work well as opposed to somebody that sort of uses a command and control approach. One of the reasons that we've offered a workshop, we're sort of co-learners in this. We're inventing it as we go along. But we've learned a lot from groups like the Central Appalachian Network that Anthony Flacovano, who's been a former webinar presenter, was part of when he was at Appalachian Sustainable Development. We've also learned a lot from, and recently just finished, one of our grad students just finished a bit of a case study on Joseph McIntyre's work in California in creating communities of practice around pressing issues. Some of them may be marketing and production issues. Others may be more socially and environmentally related, like pesticide drift, or drinking water problems and things like that. I think the approach really makes sense, and we do have on our site a value chain, a community of practice resource guide that we developed last summer. We just did another workshop for all of ISU Extension for their key leaders because our extension service in this state wants to use this approach in more of their own work. It's not just for ag. I mean, we had people in the workshop that were going to be using it for groups on dealing with gambling prevention, dealing with hunger, certainly a food system issue. So it's not just for production ag. This concept really could work in any aspect of the food system, but it's got to fit well. The old standby that you have to live by is form follows function, and the community of practice may fit, but it may not always be the right thing to do to address a problem.
Okay. I think I'm going to make this the last question. There's a question about how much nursing of the communities of practice that has to be done. How much time does it take to make sure it keeps going, or does it at some point reach a tipping point and it just sort of goes by itself?
Well, I think there's several pieces to my response. One, you need, again, I think a servant leader that gradually over time gives more and more responsibility and ownership of the group over to the members is critical. And I don't think groups where I think a command and a control approach where only one person's making the decisions and doing all the work, that group is slated for failure. I think you have to continue. We're all too busy to just, I think, come together and just think and talk about stuff, and we found that having resources to actually do work made all of the difference. We've had the groups that have had some resources, whether it be grant money or in some cases unrestricted gifts or other things, have been very helpful in, and again, we have to provide value to the members so they keep coming. And in regional foods, we're trying to move towards a model where the local groups create the agenda. They're bringing it. They're the ones making the decisions on the new groups, and it changes our role as a funder and as a leader. But I think in a good way, because eventually these groups, if they're going to be sustainable, they need to sort of move on their own and move away from the parent funder or parent nurturer, and just like we all of us that are parents, we still see our kids, but when they're 25, we hope they've moved out of the house. So, it's sort of the same approach.
Okay. Well, I apologize for the questions I was unable to get to. There are still some great questions, but we are nearly out of time. So I want to thank you, Rich, for a fascinating and wide-ranging presentation. Rich is such a deep thinker and a great presenter, and we're really appreciative of your time and your contributions to the MGFN and the Advisory Council.
Well, you're very welcome, and thanks for using a decent picture of me, because obviously the others probably aren't so good. So thanks for the opportunity, and to both Jeff and Marty for being on today.
Yeah. So let me just do a little close up. The NGFN webinars are the third Thursday of each month at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time, although sometimes, like today, we have a story. We just have to squeeze it in, so we'll add a bonus webinar here and there. All of our webinars are archived and are accessible on the web at ngfn.org/webinars. You may have noticed that this is part 2 of the Building Regional Food Systems. Part 1 is archived on our site, and it was all about the Northeast's effort to build their regional food system. So you can go to our site to review that if you missed it. Our next webinar is the third Thursday of May, May 20. It will focus on linking diverse cultures using good food as the tie that binds. We have a great presenter from Just Food, Kolu Zigby from the Jesse Smith Noyes Foundation, and another as well. After that, in June, School Food Focus, a partner organization with the NGFN, will present on their great work in Farm to School. In addition to learning what Focus does and what services they provide, there will be 1 or 2 illustrative and inspiring case studies to learn from. We also have that growing archive. We have recordings, slides, written Q&A, other resources, ngfn.org/webinars. This webinar will be up within a few business days. Marty mentioned the 5th Annual Farm to Cafeteria Conference is coming up very soon. NGFN is one of the sponsors. It takes place in Detroit, May 17 to 19. You can go to farmtocafeteriaconference.org for more information. And I also want to encourage you to participate in one of the 4 agriculture and carbon markets Making Carbon Count regional workshops put on by the Sustainable Food Lab. These interactive and practical sessions aim to answer questions like what kind of market tools will be needed in agriculture sequestration, and how do we quantify the carbon being bought. Agriculture has the opportunity to play a major role in addressing the challenge of climate change. Financial incentives of farmers to, quote, produce emission reductions or to sequester carbon can help unleash this potential. The dates are up here, June 3rd in Seattle, June 10 in California, June 14 Chicago, and June 17th. The URL sustainablefood.org/agcarbon. You can, I want to tell you about the National Good Food Network Food Safety Conference call every second Tuesday of the month. So this one is on the 11th. This week we're going to, next week we're going to start at 1:30 Eastern Time. Usually it's about 2 hours later. If you want the dial-in information and an agenda, we'll be posting that on ngfn.org/foodsafety. We also post the recordings of those calls at that URL. The agenda changes a bit each time, but usually we have a legislative update from our partner organization, NSAC, discussion of the latest trends in food safety and GAP work, such as group certification, United Fresh Produce GAP Harmonization Initiative, and much more. We hope you'll join us. And if you haven't already, sign up for our email updates. There's a link on the ngfn.org homepage. Please contact us anytime at contact@ngfn.org. And the NGFN would like to thank you for your time today. Once again, let me encourage you to fill out the very brief survey that will open in your web browser in just a moment. Thank you very much. This concludes the webinar.